The V-22 Osprey descended like a mechanical predator, its twin rotors churning the air into a hurricane of dust and debris. Below, Marina Chen stood frozen beside her white Tesla, watching $20 million of military aircraft approach the very spot where she'd arrogantly parked her car. The hospital helipad wasn't supposed to be used today. That's what the parking attendant had told her when she'd slipped him $50 to look the other way. But as the Tiltrotor's shadow engulfed her and she saw the critical care team waiting with a dying child on a stretcher, Marina realized her shortcut to the executive meeting upstairs was about to cost more than just her pride. The aircraft couldn't land, the child couldn't wait, and Marina Chen, pharmaceutical heiress turned parking violator, was about to discover that some mistakes echo far beyond the moment they're made. The morning sun cast long shadows across the St. Catherine's Medical Center when Marina Chen pulled her pristine white Tesla Model S into what she knew was restricted space. The circular helipad on the hospital's roof level stretched before her like a private parking spot, marked with yellow paint and warning signs she chose to ignore. "Ma'am, you really can't park there," called out Jerry Martinez, the parking attendant, who'd been working the hospital for 15 years. His weathered face showed concern as he approached her vehicle. Marina stepped out, her Louboutin heels clicking against the concrete. At 34, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no not, when her father's pharmaceutical empire had built half the wings in this very hospital. Her black business suit was tailored to perfection, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her expression. "It's fine," she said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through emails without looking at Jerry. "I'll only be an hour." "Board meeting? But ma'am, this is the emergency helipad. If there's a medical transport," Marina looked up from her phone, her brown eyes cold. "When was the last time you actually saw a helicopter land here?" Jerry hesitated. "Well, it's been a few months, but exactly." She reached into her Hermes purse and pulled out her wallet, extracting a crisp $50 bill. "Look, Jerry," she glanced at his name tag. "I'm Marina Chen. My family donated $12 million for the new cardiac wing. I've earned the right to park wherever I need to for one meeting." Jerry stared at the money, then at her face. He'd seen her picture in the hospital newsletter, standing next to her father at various charity events. The Chen family name was on half the buildings in the medical district. "I don't know, Ms. Chen. If something happens, nothing's going to happen." She pressed the bill into his reluctant palm. "1 hour, then I'm gone." Jerry pocketed the money. With visible discomfort, 1 hour, he repeated quietly. Marina was already walking toward the elevator, her heels echoing off the concrete walls. The executive boardroom was on the 15th floor, and she was running late for the quarterly pharmaceutical review. As the daughter of Chen Pharmaceuticals' founder, she sat on the board more as a formality than for any real expertise. But appearances mattered in their world. The elevator hummed as it carried her upward, and Marina checked her reflection in the polished steel doors, perfect as always. She'd built her life on maintaining control, on having everything exactly where it needed to be. The parking situation was just another example of efficient problem-solving. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, 8-year-old Tyler Reeves was fighting for his life in the back of a speeding ambulance. The boy had been playing in his backyard. In rural Arizona, when a rattlesnake had struck, injecting enough venom to shut down his small body's systems, the local hospital had stabilized him temporarily. But he needed immediate access to a specialized antivenom that only St. Catherine's possessed. ETA to St. Catherine's, asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the flight physician aboard the V-22 Osprey Tiltrotor aircraft that was racing toward the California Medical Center. 15 minutes, replied Captain Marcus Webb, the pilot whose steady hands had guided medical transports. For over a decade, weather's clear, helipad should be open. Dr. Kim looked down at Tyler, whose small face was pale and sweaty despite the aircraft's climate control. His mother, Rebecca Reeves, clutched his hand while fighting back tears. She was a single mother, a waitress who'd taken 3 jobs to support her son after her husband had died in a construction accident too. Years earlier, is he going to be okay? Rebecca asked for the 10th time in as many minutes. Dr. Kim checked Tyler's vitals on the portable monitor. His blood pressure was dropping, and his breathing had become more labored. "We're going to do everything we can," she said. which was the truth, and also not quite an answer, back at St. Catherine's. Marina had settled into the boardroom's leather chair, her tablet open to the quarterly reports. The meeting was the usual blend of financial projections and regulatory updates, the kind of corporate theater she'd been performing in since her father had insisted she join the board 5 years earlier. "Marina, what's your read on the new guidelines for pediatric testing?" asked Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the chief medical officer. Marina glanced up from her phone, where she'd been responding to texts about her upcoming trip to Aspen. "I think we should maintain our current protocols until we see how the regulatory landscape settles." It was a non-answer, the kind of corporate speak she'd perfected over years of board meetings. Dr. Hayes nodded politely, but Marina caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Everyone in the room knew Marina was there because of her last name, not her expertise. The V-22 Osprey appeared on the horizon like a mechanical bird of prey, its twin rotors already tilting into helicopter mode as it approached St. Catherine's. Captain Webb had radioed ahead to confirm the landing, and the hospital's emergency team was standing by. "St. Catherine's Tower, this is Medevac 77, requesting immediate landing clearance." Webb's voice crackled over the radio. "Medevac 77, you're cleared for landing on Helipad Alpha. Emergency team is standing by." Jerry Martinez heard the radio chatter from the parking booth and felt his stomach drop. He looked out at the white Tesla sitting squarely in the center of the helipad, its chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Oh no," he whispered, grabbing his radio. "Tower, this is ground control. We have a problem with Helipad Alpha." "What kind of problem?" "Ground control." Jerry closed his eyes. "There's a vehicle on the pad, civilian car." The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. "Ground control. Confirm, did you say there's a car on the helipad?" "Affirmative. White Tesla." I tried to stop her. In the Osprey, Captain Webb heard the exchange and felt his jaw clench. "Tower, what are my options?" "Patient is critical." Dr. Kim looked at Tyler's monitor and saw what she'd been dreading. His blood pressure was dropping faster, and his oxygen saturation was falling despite the supplemental oxygen they were providing. "Captain, we need to land now," she said urgently. "He's going into shock." Tyler's mother looked up with panic in her eyes. "What's happening? What's wrong?" "Tower to Medevac 77, came the strained voice of the air traffic controller. "Stand by while we resolve the parking situation. Negative, Tower. Patient can't wait. I need that pad cleared now." Down in the boardroom, Marina was half listening to a presentation about supply chain logistics when her phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. "Emergency helicopter coming. Need you to move car now?" She frowned and typed back, "5 more minutes." Jerry's response was immediate. "No time. Kid dying. Move now." Marina looked around the boardroom, where Dr. Hayes was discussing inventory management protocols. She could slip out for a few minutes without anyone noticing. But as she started to rise from her chair, the hospital's CEO, Dr. Robert Sterling, walked in with an expression she'd never seen before. "I need to interrupt," he said, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "We have a medical emergency inbound. Critical pediatric patient. The helicopter can't land because someone has parked on our helipad." The room went silent. Marina felt every eye turn toward her, though no one yet knew she was the culprit. "How is that possible?" asked Dr. Hayes. "The helipad is clearly marked." "We're investigating," Dr. Sterling replied. "But right now, we have a child who's going to die if we can't get him on the ground in the next few minutes." Marina's mouth went dry. She looked down at her phone, seeing 3 more urgent texts from Jerry, each one more desperate than the last. "I'll go see if I can help with the situation," she said quietly, starting to stand. "Actually," Dr. Sterling said, his phone buzzing in his hand, "I just got word on who owns the vehicle." He looked directly at Marina, and she saw recognition dawn in his eyes. "It's a white Tesla Model S license plate, CHEN1. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marina felt her face flush as every board member turned to stare. At her, Dr. Hayes' expression shifted from confusion to something approaching disgust. "Marina," Dr. Sterling said, his voice deadly quiet, "please tell me you didn't park your car on our emergency helipad." Before she could answer, the sound of the Osprey's rotors filled the air outside the boardroom windows. Everyone turned to look as the massive aircraft hovered 30 feet above the building, unable to land, its patient compartment visible through the windows. Marina could see figures moving inside the aircraft Part 2. The conference room felt like a courtroom when Marina walked in 15 minutes later. She'd attempted to repair her appearance in the bathrooms, smoothing her hair, cleaning the blood from her knees, reapplying lipstick with hands that still trembled, but the damage went deeper than cosmetics could fix. Dr. Robert Sterling sat at the head of the mahogany table, his usually diplomatic expression replaced by something Marina had never seen directed at her, barely controlled fury. The other board members avoided her eyes, their discomfort palpable in the sterile air. "Sit down, Marina." His voice carried the weight of 30 years in hospital administration. Decades of life-and-death decisions that had carved lines around his eyes. Marina took her usual seat, the leather chair that had always felt like a throne, now seeming to swallow her whole. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Tyler Reeves, Dr. Sterling began reading from his tablet, is 8 years old. His father died in a construction accident when Tyler was 6. His mother, Rebecca, works 3 jobs to support them, waitressing at a diner, cleaning offices at night, and stocking shelves at a grocery store on weekends. Marina's manicured fingers gripped the armrests of her chair. Tyler was bitten by a diamondback rattlesnake this morning while playing in his backyard. The local hospital in Flagstaff stabilized him, but he needed our specialized anti-venom protocol. The transport time was critical. Every minute increased the risk of permanent organ damage or death. Dr. Hayes leaned forward, her medical training making her voice clinical despite the emotion underneath. Rattlesnake envenomation in children is particularly dangerous because of their smaller body mass. The venom concentration becomes more potent, and the window for effective treatment is narrow. "How narrow?" Marina asked, though she dreaded the answer. In severe cases like Tyler's, brain damage can occur within 20 to 30 minutes of cardiovascular collapse. Death can follow. Within an hour, the words hit Marina like physical blows. She thought of the small form she'd glimpsed on the gurney, the woman running alongside it with terror in her eyes. "The Osprey was delayed exactly 7 minutes and 34 seconds because of your vehicle," Dr. Sterling continued. 7 minutes and 34 seconds that could have been the difference between Tyler walking out of this hospital or leaving in a body bag. Board member James Wu, who'd always been cordial to Marina despite clearly considering her a privileged placeholder, spoke for the first time. "What I don't understand is how this happened. Jerry Martinez has worked parking for 15 years. He's never had a security incident." Marina felt the weight of their stares. I asked him to look the other way. I paid him $50. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Sterling's jaw worked as if he were chewing glass. "You bribed a hospital employee to ignore safety protocols so you could park illegally on an emergency helipad." "I didn't think." "No, you didn't think?" Dr. Sterling's composure finally cracked. "You didn't think about the children who might need that helipad. You didn't think about the medical teams who depend on clear access for critical transports. You didn't think about anyone but yourself." Marina's phone buzzed. Without thinking, she glanced at a text from her personal assistant about dinner reservations. The casual nature of the message in this context felt obscene. Dr. Hayes was studying her tablet. "Marina, I'm looking at your attendance record for these board meetings. In the past year, you've missed 6 out of 12 meetings. When you have attended, you've contributed an average of 2.3 comments per meeting, most of them non-substantive. I don't see what that has to do with it. Has everything to do with this." Dr. Sterling's voice was quiet now, which somehow made it more frightening. "You treat this board position like a hobby. You treat this hospital like your personal convenience. And today, you treated our emergency protocols like suggestions that don't apply to you." The door opened, and Dr. Patricia Morse, the head of Pediatric Emergency Medicine, entered without knocking. Her scrubs were still damp with sweat, and her expression was grim. "How is he?" Dr. Sterling asked immediately. "Stable. We got the anti-venom administered within the therapeutic window. But it was close to close." She looked directly at Marina. "Another 10 minutes, and we would have been looking at significant neurological damage. 15 minutes, and we would have lost him." Marina felt the room spin slightly. "But he's okay. He's going to recover. Physically, yes. Emotionally, Dr. Morse shook her head. That little boy was conscious when we wheeled him in. He was terrified, asking for his mother, asking if he was going to die. His mother is a wretch. He's been holding it together for 2 years since her husband died. And today, she almost lost the only family she has left. Can I see them to apologize? The look Dr. Morse gave her could have frozen water. Absolutely not. Marina's throat constricted. I didn't mean for this to happen. Intent doesn't matter when you're dealing with life and death, Dr. Morse replied. Results matter. Consequences matter. And the consequence of your actions today nearly killed a child. After Dr. Morse left, the room fell into another heavy silence. Marina could hear the muffled sounds of the hospital beyond the conference room walls, the beeping of monitors, the soft footsteps of nurses, the distant sound of a PA system calling for doctors, all the sounds of a place where real work happened, where people fought to save lives while she played at being important. I want to know about Jerry Martinez, said Dr. Sterling. Marina's heart sank further. What about him? He's worked here for 15 years. Clean record, no incidents, well liked by staff and patients. And today, he made a decision that nearly had catastrophic consequences. Because you put him in an impossible position. He could have said no, could he? Dr. Wu leaned forward. You're the daughter of the hospital's largest donor. Your family name is on half our buildings. You handed him $50 and essentially told him his concerns didn't matter. What leverage did he have? Marina realized she'd never thought about it from Jerry's perspective. She'd seen him as an obstacle to be overcome, not as a person with his own pressures and concerns. What's going to happen to him? She asked quietly. That depends on a lot of factors, Dr. Sterling replied. But I can tell you that his job is in jeopardy. Hospital security policies exist for a reason, and he violated them. The fact that he was essentially coerced doesn't change the outcome. The weight of Jerry's potential job loss added another layer to Marina's growing burden of guilt. She thought of his weathered face, the way he'd tried to warn her, the reluctance with which he'd taken her money. I'll talk to him, she said. I'll explain that it was my fault that he tried to stop me. That's not how this works, Dr. Hayes said, her voice tired. Jerry is a grown man who made a decision. He has to live with the consequences. Just like, you do? Marina's phone buzzed again. This time it was her father a text asking how the board meeting had gone. She stared at the message, wondering how she was going to explain this to the man who'd built Chen Pharmaceuticals from nothing, who'd donated millions to hospitals like this one, who'd always expected her to uphold the family name with dignity. There's something else we need to discuss, Dr. Sterling said, pulling her attention back to the room. The media. Marina's blood ran cold. The media. A medical transport helicopter being unable to land because of a legally parked car. A child nearly dying because of someone's selfishness. This is exactly the kind of story that goes viral, especially when that someone is the daughter of a pharmaceutical company owner. The implications hit her like an avalanche. Chen Pharmaceuticals was a publicly traded company. Any scandal involving the founder's family could affect stock prices, investor confidence, regulatory relationships. Her father had spent 40 years building the company's reputation. Has anyone contacted the press? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Not yet, but hospital employees talk. Patients, families talk. Social media makes everything public eventually. Dr. Sterling's expression was grim. The question is whether we try to get ahead of this story or let it develop on its own. Marina thought about Tyler's mother, Rebecca, who'd been running alongside that gurney with terror in her eyes. If this story went public, would she be subjected to media attention? Would her son's near-death experience become tabloid fodder? What do you recommend? Marina asked. Honestly, I recommend you figure out how to make this right. Not for your reputation, not for the hospital's reputation, but for that little boy and his mother. And for Jerry Martinez, whose life you've turned upside down. How do I do that? Dr. Sterling stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. That's something you need to figure out yourself. But I'll tell you, this writing a check isn't going to fix this. Your family's donations don't give you the right to endanger lives. As the other board members filed out, Marina remained seated, staring at the polished table surface. In its reflection, she could see a distorted version of herself, and unclear, like everything she thought she knew, about who she was. Her phone rang. It was her father. "Marina, sweetheart, how did the meeting go?" David Chen's voice carried the accent of his childhood in Taiwan, softened by decades in America, but never E. The news alert felt like a physical blow to Marina's chest. Her hands trembled as she opened the article, each word hitting her like a hammer strike. Sources at St. Catherine's Medical Center confirmed that Marina Chen, daughter of pharmaceutical magnate David Chen, illegally parked her Tesla on the hospital's emergency helipad this afternoon, preventing a critical medical transport from landing. 8-year-old Tyler Reeves, suffering from severe rattlesnake inflammation, was forced to wait in a hovering aircraft while hospital staff scrambled to clear the landing pad. "She could have killed that boy," said one hospital employee who requested anonymity. 7 minutes doesn't sound like much, but in medicine, her father's assistant, her own publicist. She turned it off and shoved it into her purse. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everything look sickly and wrong. She found Jerry Martinez in the security office, filling out what looked like an incident report. He looked up when she entered, his weathered face showing no surprise at seeing her. If anything, he looked resigned. "Miss Chen," he said quietly, "I figured you'd be here eventually." Marina started, then stopped. She'd rehearsed apologies in the elevator, but now, faced with the man whose life she'd potentially destroyed, words felt inadequate. "You saw the news," he said. It wasn't a question. Marina nodded, unable to trust her voice. Jerry set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. The office was small and cramped, filled with security monitors and filing cabinets. A coffee mug with "World's Best Grandpa" sat on his desk next to a framed photo of 2 young children. 15 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 15 years of perfect attendance, clean record, never so much as a written warning. And now, "Jerry, I'll talk to Dr. Sterling. I'll explain that you tried to stop me, that I forced you to. Did you force me?" Jerry interrupted, his tired eyes meeting hers. "You offered me money, and I took it. Nobody held a gun to my head." Marina sank into the chair across from his desk. "But you tried to warn me. You told me it was dangerous. And when you ignored me, I should have called security. I should have reported the violation immediately. I should have done my job." He picked up the photo of the children. "My grandkids. Lucy's 8, same age as that boy who almost died today. Danny's 6. Their parents are going through a divorce, and I help with daycare costs, school supplies, Little League fees." The weight of his words settled over Marina like a lead blanket. "Jerry, I'm going to fix this. I'll make sure you keep your job." Jerry's laugh was bitter. "You think this is about my job? Miss Chen, a child almost died today because I took your $50. That's something I have to live with for the rest of my life." Before Marina could respond, the office door opened. Dr. Sterling entered, his expression grim. "I thought I'd find you here," he said to Marina. "We need to talk. Both of you." Jerry stood up. "Dr. Sterling, I want to submit my resignation." "Sit down, Jerry." Dr. Sterling's voice was firm but not unkind. "We're not making any decisions tonight. Not while emotions are running high and the media is circling like vultures." Marina looked up at him. "How bad is it?" #HelipadGate is trending on Twitter. Someone leaked security footage of you arguing with Jerry and then running to your car when the helicopter arrived. Marina felt sick. "They have video." "Of course they have video. This is a hospital, Marina. We have security cameras everywhere." "The footage shows you clearly ignoring Jerry's warnings, shows you handing him money, shows you running back to move your car when the helicopter couldn't land." Jerry buried his face in his hands. "My wife's going to see this? My kids? My grandchildren?" "There's more," Dr. Sterling continued. "Someone leaked Tyler's mother's name, Rebecca Reeves. The press is trying to contact her for comment." Marina's blood ran cold. "They're going after the family." "Of course they are. Single mother, dead husband, child almost dies because of a rich pharmaceutical heiress's selfishness. It's a story made for the 24-hour news cycle." Marina stood up abruptly. "I need to talk to her." "To apologize, absolutely not." Dr. Sterling's voice was sharp. "That woman has been through enough. But you have to stay away from her. In fact, you have to stay away from this hospital until we figure out how to handle this situation." The words hit Marina like a slap. You're banning me? I'm protecting our patients and staff. From the media circus that follows you around now, look outside. There are news vans in our parking lot. Reporters are trying to interview patients and families. Your presence here is disruptive." Marina looked through the office's small window and saw the glow of television lights in the parking garage. The reality of her situation was becoming clearer by the minute. "What about the board meeting tomorrow?" she asked, postponed indefinitely. "The hospital's attorneys are reviewing your position on the board." Jerry looked up from his hands. "Dr. Sterling, what about my job?" Dr. Sterling's expression softened slightly. "Jerry, you've been a good employee for 15 years, but you violated a fundamental safety protocol. The board is going to have to review your case. I understand." "No, you don't understand," Marina said, her voice rising. "None of this is Jerry's fault. I manipulated him. I used my family's position to pressure him into doing something he knew was wrong." "That may be true," Dr. Sterling replied, "but it doesn't change the facts. Jerry is a grown man who made a decision. He has to face the consequences of that decision." Marina's phone, despite being turned off, began buzzing in her purse. She'd forgotten that some calls could still come through even when the device was powered down emergency contacts. Her father's number, she pulled it out and saw 17 missed calls from her father, 12 from her publicist, and 43 from unknown numbers, probably reporters. There were also dozens of text messages, most of them from people she barely knew, asking if she was okay or if the news reports were true. One message stood out. It was from her college roommate, Sarah, who worked as a nurse at a children's hospital in Denver. "Marina, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't really do this." Marina stared at the message, remembering Sarah's stories about working in pediatric emergency medicine, about the split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death, about the families who trusted her with their most precious possessions, their children. "I need to go," Marina said suddenly, standing up. "Where?" Dr. Sterling asked. "I don't know. Home, somewhere. I need to think." "Marina," Jerry said as she reached the door, "I don't blame you. Not entirely. I made my choice." Marina turned back to him. "Why? Why did you take the money?" Jerry was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've been working 3 jobs to help my daughter with her kids since her husband lost his job. Because $50 is groceries for a week. Because I've been invisible to people like you my whole life, and when you finally noticed me, I wanted to matter." The honesty in his voice was devastating. Marina realized that she'd never even asked Jerry about his life, his family, his concerns. He'd been a uniform to her, a function rather than a person. But sorry doesn't undo what happened. Marina left the hospital through a side entrance, hoping to avoid the media circus in the main parking lot. But as she walked toward her car, she saw a reporter and cameraman rushing toward her. "Ms. Chen, Ms. Chen, can you comment on the allegations that you endangered a child's life?" Marina kept walking, her head down, but the reporter kept pace beside her. "Is it true that you bribed a hospital employee to ignore safety protocols?" Marina reached her car and fumbled with the keys. The camera was rolling. She could feel it focused on her like a spotlight. "Ms. Chen, Tyler Reeves, is 8 years old. His father is dead. His mother works 3 jobs to support him. Do you have anything to say to that family?" Marina finally got the car door open. Before she could stop herself, she turned to face the reporter. She started, then stopped. What could she say? That she was sorry. That she hadn't meant for this to happen. That she'd pay for the boy's medical bills. All of those things were true, but they were also inadequate. They were the responses of someone who still didn't fully understand the magnitude of what she'd done. "I have no comment," she said finally, getting into her car. But as she drove away, she could see the reporter talking to the camera, probably describing her as callous, unrepentant, hiding behind her family's wealth and privilege. Part was, until this afternoon. That description would have been accurate. Marina drove aimlessly through the city, her phone buzzing constantly with calls and messages. She found herself in neighborhoods she'd never seen before, despite living in the city her entire life. Areas where the houses were small and close together, where children played in yards without perfectly manicured landscaping, where people worked jobs that didn't come with trust funds and board positions. She stopped at a red light Part 4. The Chen family estate sat on 15 acres of perfectly manicured hillside, its modern architecture commanding a view of the entire city below. Marina had grown up here, insulated by gates and security cameras and staff who anticipated her every need. As she drove through the familiar entrance, the irony wasn't lost on her. She was returning to her fortress of privilege to face the consequences of that very privilege. Her father was waiting in his study, standing with his back to the door, looking out at the city lights. At 72, David Chen still carried himself with the posture of a man who'd built an empire through sheer force of will. But tonight, Marina could see the weight of disappointment in the set of his shoulders. "Sit down, Marina," he said without turning around. The study was lined with awards and photographs, David shaking hands with presidents, receiving humanitarian honors, cutting ribbons at hospital openings. The Chen Foundation had donated over $100 million to medical causes over the past 2 decades. Every plaque and certificate on these walls represented lives saved, research funded, hope provided to families in crisis, and today, his daughter had nearly undone decades of that goodwill in 7 minutes and 34 seconds. "I've been getting calls," David said, finally turning to face her. His accent was more pronounced when he was upset, the careful American English of his business persona giving way to the rhythms of his childhood. The board of directors, major shareholders, hospital administrators, government officials. Marina sank into the leather chair across from his desk. "Dad, do you know what Chen Pharmaceuticals' stock price was when the market closed today?" She shook her head. "Down 8%. 8% in one day, because investors are worried about the company's judgment, its leadership, its values." He moved to his desk and pulled up something on his computer. "But that's not the worst part." David turned the monitor toward her. It showed a news segment from the evening broadcast. Marina watched herself running across the helipad, her hair whipping in the helicopter's downdraft, her expensive clothes torn by the wind, but it was the voiceover that made her stomach clench, while 8-year-old Tyler Reeves fought for his life 30 feet above. Marina Chen, heir to the Chen pharmaceutical fortune, struggled to move the Tesla sheet illegally. Parked on the emergency landing pad, sources say Chen bribed a hospital employee to ignore safety protocols, potentially costing precious minutes that could have meant the difference between life and death for the young boy. The segment cut to a photo of Tyler's school picture, showing a gap-toothed smile and bright eyes. Then to footage of his mother, Rebecca, leaving the hospital with reporters shouting questions at her. "Turn it off," Marina whispered. Double quotes. "No, you need to see this." David's voice was firm. "You need to understand what you've done," the reporter continued. Rebecca Reeves, a single mother working 3 jobs to support her son after her husband's death in a construction accident, declined to comment. But neighbors described Tyler as a bright, athletic boy who loves baseball and dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Marina felt tears burning her eyes. "Dad, please, the boy you almost killed has a name. He has dreams. He has a mother who's already lost her husband and almost lost her son because you couldn't be bothered to park in a legal space." The segment ended with footage of Chen Pharmaceuticals' headquarters while the reporter discussed the company's history of charitable giving and its founder's reputation for putting patients first. The contrast between the family's public image and Marina's actions was stark and devastating. David closed the laptop and sat down across from her. "I built this company from nothing. When I came to America, I had $300 and a chemistry degree. I worked 16-hour days for 20 years to build something that mattered, something that helped people." "I know, Dad. I know the story." "Do you? Because your actions today suggest you've forgotten what this family stands for." Marina looked around the study at all the evidence of her father's life's work. "I never asked to be the heir to all this." "No, you didn't ask. It was given to you, along with every privilege money could buy: the best schools, the finest opportunities, a board position you never earned." David's voice rose slightly. "And what did you do with those privileges? You used them to bully a working man into ignoring safety rules so you could save yourself a few minutes of walking." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Marina wanted to argue, to explain that she hadn't meant for any of this to happen, but the words felt hollow even in her own mind. "I've been in damage control meetings for the past 6 hours," David continued. The hospital board wants you removed. From your position, 3 major pharmaceutical companies have pulled out of joint ventures, citing concerns about Chen family values. The FDA is launching an investigation into our pediatric drug trials, questioning whether a company whose heir endangers children can be trusted with children's medications. Each revelation hit Marina like a physical blow, an FDA investigation. Your actions today called into question everything we've built, the public trust we've earned, the relationships we've cultivated. The reputation for putting patients first, all of it, is compromised. Marina's phone, sitting silent on the desk between them, suddenly lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID showed her publicist's name. "Aren't you going to answer it?" David asked. "I've been avoiding calls all evening." "Answer it?" Marina reluctantly picked up the phone. "Hi, Jennifer." Jennifer Walsh had been managing celebrity and corporate crises for 15 years. Her voice was professional but strained. "Marina, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I'm at my father's house." "Good. We need to strategize immediately." The story is exploding across all platforms. #HelipadGate is trending worldwide. There's already a GoFundMe page for Tyler Reeves' family that's raised over $50,000. Marina glanced at her father, who is listening to every word. "What do you recommend?" "Full crisis mode." "We schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. You apologize publicly, announce a major donation to the hospital, maybe establish a scholarship fund in Tyler's name. We control the narrative before it controls us." "That sounds like a good plan," Marina said, grasping for any solution that might make this nightmare go away. "No," David said firmly. "Hang up the phone, Jennifer. I need to call you back." After Marina ended the call, David leaned forward in his chair. "That's exactly the wrong approach. But if we don't get ahead of this, you can't get ahead of this, Marina. This isn't a public relations problem. This is a moral failing. And you don't fix moral failings with press conferences and charitable donations." Marina felt a flash of her old defensiveness. "Then what do you suggest I do? Sit here and let them destroy me? Maybe being destroyed is exactly what you need." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" David stood and walked to the window again. "You've lived your entire life without consequences. Every mistake you've made, every selfish decision, every moment of thoughtlessness, fixed it with money or influence. You crashed your car in college. I bought you a new one and made the DUI charges disappear. You failed your pharmaceutical law class. I donated a new library wing and suddenly your grade improved. You've never had to face the real consequences of your actions. You're my father. You were protecting me. I was enabling you. And today, that enablement nearly cost a child his life." Marina felt her world shifting beneath her feet. "So what are you saying?" David turned back to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, resolve that frightened her. "I'm saying it's time for you to learn what consequences feel like. Real consequences." "What does that mean?" "It means you're removed from the board of directors, effective immediately. It means your trust fund is frozen until you demonstrate genuine change. It means you're no longer employed by Chen Pharmaceuticals in any capacity." Marina felt the air leave her lungs. "You're cutting me off. I'm forcing you to grow up. For the first time in your life, you're going to have to face your problems without my money or influence to shield you." "Dad, that's crazy. I'm your daughter. Yes, you are. And because I love you, I'm not going to enable your selfishness." Anymore, David's voice was steady, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "The daughter I raised today bribed a hospital employee and nearly killed a child. That's not the person I wanted you to become." Marina's phone rang again. This time it was Jerry Martinez. She looked at the caller ID with confusion. "Answer it." David said. "Jerry, how did you get my number?" Jerry's voice was tired, older than it had sounded that afternoon. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to let you know I've been fired." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Jerry, no. I told Dr. Sterling that I forced you. You didn't force me to do anything. I made a choice, and choices have consequences." His voice was steady, resigned. 15 years of service, and it's over because I took $50 from you. I'll fix this. I'll call Dr. Sterling. You can't fix this, Ms. Chen. Some things can't be fixed with money or influence. Some things you just have to live with." Jerry, I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't pay my bills or fix my reputation. Sorry doesn't help me explain to my grandchildren why Grandpa lost his job. The line went quiet for a moment. Marina could hear the weight of Jerry's situation in the Part 6. 6 months later, Marina stood in the break room of Sunnyside Diner at 4:45 a.m., tying the apron strings of her uniform with hands that had grown calloused from washing dishes and carrying heavy trays. The polyester dress was a far cry from her designer suits, and her feet ached in the cheap sneakers that were all she could afford on her dishwashers. Salary of $12.50 an hour, she'd been living in a studio apartment in East Oakland for 4 months now. Ever since her father had followed through on his promise to cut her off completely, the apartment was 400 square feet of thin walls and temperamental plumbing, shared with cockroaches and the sounds of her neighbors' lives bleeding through the drywall. Her monthly rent of $1,200 consumed most of her income, leaving little for anything beyond ramen noodles and bus fare. Marina, table 6, needs more coffee, called Dolores. The morning shift manager who'd reluctantly hired her despite her complete lack of food service experience. At 63, Dolores worked 2 jobs to support her disabled husband, and she had no patience for the learning curve of a former pharmaceutical heiress. Marina grabbed the coffee pot and headed to table 6, where Harold Jameson sat reading yesterday's newspaper. Harold was 74, a retired mechanic who came in every morning at 5 a.m. for black coffee and wheat toast. Over the past months, Marina had learned that Harold lived on Social Security, that his wife had died 3 years earlier, and that the diner was often the only human contact he had all day. "Good morning, Mr. Jameson," Marina said, refilling his cup with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to move quickly, to anticipate customers' needs, to smile even when her feet screamed and her back ached. "Morning, Marina. You look tired today." Marina managed a genuine smile. Harold was one of the few customers who treated her like a person rather than invisible service staff. Late night, my neighbor's baby was crying. What she didn't tell Harold was that she'd stayed up listening to that baby cry, thinking about Tyler Reeves and what his mother must have felt during those terrifying minutes when the helicopter couldn't land. She'd learned to hear suffering differently now, to understand that every cry, every struggle, every moment of desperation belonged to a real person with a real story. The bell above the diner's door chimed, and Marina looked up to see a familiar face that made her stomach drop. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes from St. Catherine's Board walked in. Looking around the modest diner with obvious discomfort, Marina ducked into the kitchen, her heart racing. She hadn't spoken to anyone from her former life since the day she'd moved into the studio apartment. Her father had made it clear that her exile was complete: no contact with family friends, no access to the family fortune, no safety net of any kind. "Marina," Dolores called. "Customer at table 3 wants to see you specifically." Marina's hands trembled as she walked back into the dining room. Dr. Hayes was sitting in the corner booth, her expensive handbag looking out of place on the cracked vinyl seat. "Dr. Hayes," Marina said quietly, approaching the table. "Can I get you some coffee?" "Sit down, Marina, please." Marina glanced around the diner. The breakfast rush was still an hour away, and Dolores was in the back doing inventory. She slid into the booth across from Dr. Hayes, acutely aware of how she must look, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, makeup-free face showing the exhaustion of someone who worked on her feet for 10 hours a day. "I've been looking for you," Dr. Hayes said. "Your father wouldn't tell me where you were. I asked him not to." Dr. Hayes studied Marina's face, taking in the changes that 6 months of real life had wrought. "You look different. I am different. Are you? Or are you just playing at being poor until this whole thing blows over?" The question stung, because Marina had asked herself the same thing many times during the hardest moments when she'd had to choose between groceries and electricity, when she'd gotten sick and couldn't afford to see a doctor, when she'd realized that her expensive education meant nothing without connections and references. "If I was playing, I would have quit by now," Marina said quietly. Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "Tyler Reeves is doing well, fully recovered, no lasting effects from the inflammation." Marina felt relief wash over her, even though she'd been following Tyler's recovery through local news reports. "That's good. I'm glad. His mother isn't doing as well." The media attention was brutal. She had to change jobs because reporters kept showing up at the diner where she worked. The guilt hit Marina like a physical blow. Even in her exile, her actions continued to ripple outward, affecting people she'd never met. "I didn't know there's a lot you didn't know." Rebecca Reeves received over $200,000. In donations from the GoFundMe page that was started after your incident, it was enough to pay off her medical bills and put some money aside for Tyler's education. Marina nodded, unsure how to respond, but she gave most of it away. Dr. Hayes continued. 2 other families dealing with medical emergencies, 2 children's hospitals, 2 emergency transport services. She said she didn't want to profit from her son's near-death experience. The contrast between Rebecca's response and her own family's wealth was stark and humbling. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She is, which makes what happened next even more tragic. Marina's blood ran cold. What happened? Jerry Martinez killed himself 3 weeks ago. The words hit Marina like a physical blow. The coffee pot slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor as black liquid spread across the linoleum. She stared at Dr. Hayes, unable to process what she'd just heard. What? He couldn't find another job. At his age, with the publicity from what happened, no one would hire him. His family lost their house. His wife Carol is living with their daughter now, but the strain destroyed their marriage. Jerry left a note saying he couldn't live with the shame of what he'd done. Marina felt the room spinning around her. Jerry's kind face flashed through her memory, his reluctance to take her money, his attempts to warn her, his quiet dignity even after he'd been fired. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be true. It's true. The funeral was last week. Carol Martinez blamed you directly. She said Jerry might have made a mistake, but you destroyed his life for $50 and a parking space." Marina doubled over, feeling like she was going to vomit. The weight of Jerry's death, the finality of it, the knowledge that her actions had led to a good man taking his own life was more than she could bear. "I have to," she started, trying to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. "Sit down," Dr. Hayes said firmly. "You need to hear the rest. There's more." Jerry's death changed everything. The media attention shifted. You went from being a spoiled heiress who endangered a child to being someone whose privilege literally killed a working man. The public outrage was ... intense. Marina thought about her self-imposed exile, her deliberate disconnection from news and social media. She'd been living in a bubble of her own poverty, unaware that the consequences of her actions had continued to unfold. Your father's company stock dropped another 15% after Jerry's death. 3 board members resigned. The FDA investigation expanded. Chen Pharmaceuticals is facing the possibility of criminal charges for safety violations. At their manufacturing facilities, each revelation was another weight added to Marina's crushing burden of guilt. Because of what I did, because of what you did, and because of how your family handled it afterward. Your father's decision to cut you off was seen as him trying to distance the company from your actions rather than taking responsibility. Marina felt tears streaming down her face. "I destroyed everything, yes, you did. The question is, what you're going to do about it. What can I do? Jerry's dead. I can't bring him back." Dr. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying Marina's anguished face. "No, you can't. But you can choose what his death means." "What do you mean?" "You can let it destroy you, like it destroyed him. Or you can find a way to make sure his death means something." Before Marina could respond, Dolores appeared with a mop and dustpan. "Marina, what happened here?" "I'm sorry. I dropped the coffee pot." "I'll pay for it." "Damn right you will. And clean this up before the breakfast rush starts." Dr. Hayes watched as Marina got down on her hands and knees to clean up the broken glass and spilled coffee. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them, the former pharmaceutical heiress, scrubbing floors while discussing the death of a man whose life she'd destroyed. "There's something else," Dr. Hayes said when Marina finished cleaning. "Tyler Reeves wants to meet you." Marina looked up from where she was kneeling on the floor. "What? His mother's against it? She thinks you'll just hurt him more. But Tyler has been asking questions about why the helicopter couldn't land, about what happened to the man who lost his job. He's smart, and he's putting pieces together. He's 8 years old. He's 8 years old, and he understands that people make mistakes. He wants to understand why you made yours." Marina stood up slowly, her mind reeling. "Dr. Hayes, I can't face that child." "Why not?" "Because I almost killed him. Because my selfishness nearly took away everything he'll ever be, everything he'll ever do. Because looking at him will remind me that I'm capable of destroying innocent lives for the sake of my own convenience. Maybe that's exactly why you need to face him." The breakfast rush began at 6 a.m., and Marina spent the next 4 hours moving mechanically through her routine taking. Part 5. Marina didn't sleep that night. She lay in her childhood bedroom. Reminder of a time when her biggest concern had been whether she'd get into her first-choice college. Now, at 34, she was facing the collapse of everything she'd thought she knew about herself. At 5:30 a.m., she'd found his address through public records, a modest tract home in a working-class area 40 minutes from the hospital. The house was small but well-maintained, with a carefully tended garden and children's toys scattered in the yard. She sat in her car across the street, watching as lights came on in the kitchen window. At 6:15, Jerry emerged to get the newspaper. He was dressed in civilian clothes instead of his hospital uniform, a detail that hit Marina harder than she'd expected. Jerry saw her car immediately. For a moment, they stared at each other across the quiet street. Then he walked over, his face showing resignation rather than anger. "Ms. Chen," he said as she rolled down her window. "You shouldn't be here, I know, but I needed to see you, to try to understand what I've really done." Jerry glanced back at his house, where a woman's silhouette appeared briefly in the kitchen window. "My wife doesn't want to see you, and honestly, neither do I, please. Just 5 minutes." Jerry studied her face, perhaps seeing something different than the composed heiress who'd bribed him yesterday. 5 minutes, but not here. Down the street, they drove to a small park 3 blocks away, empty except for a few early morning joggers. Jerry sat on a bench while Marina stood awkwardly nearby, her expensive clothes out of place in the humble neighborhood setting. "You want to understand what you've done," Jerry said, his voice tired. "Look around. This is what $15 an hour for 15 years gets you. A small house with a big mortgage, a 10-year-old car, and just enough saved to maybe help your grandkids with college." Marina followed his gaze to the modest homes surrounding the park. "Jerry, I want to help." "No, you want to feel better. There's a difference." He leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped between his knees. "You know what the worst part is? It's not losing the job. It's knowing that I compromised everything I believed in for $50. But you tried to stop me. I tried. Then I gave up. When you flashed that money and mentioned your family's donations, I saw dollar signs. My granddaughter Lucy needs physical therapy that insurance won't cover. My grandson Danny's asthma medications cost $300 a month, even with insurance." Jerry's voice cracked slightly. Marina sank onto the bench beside him, maintaining careful distance. "I put you in an impossible position. Maybe. But I still made the choice. And now I have to live with knowing that a child almost died because I was thinking about grocery money instead of doing my job." They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the neighborhood wake up around them. Marina saw families getting ready for work and school, people starting their days with the kind of routine responsibilities she'd never had to face. "Jerry," she said finally, "what can I do? How do I make this right?" "You can't make it right. That's what you need to understand. Some things can't be fixed, only lived with." He stood up, preparing to leave. "But if you really want to do something, stop trying to manage this situation and start trying to understand it." "What does that mean?" "It means stop thinking about how to minimize the damage to your reputation and start thinking about the people whose lives you've affected." Our children began arriving for early morning soccer practice, their parents setting up folding chairs and unpacking snacks. She watched a mother help her young son tie his cleats. The simple intimacy of the gesture, highlighting everything she'd nearly taken away from Rebecca Reeves. Her phone buzzed constantly, reporters, her publicist, board members from her father's company. She turned it off and drove aimlessly through the city, seeing neighborhoods and communities she'd never noticed despite living here her entire life. Around noon, she found herself in the parking lot of St. Catherine's Medical Center. The media circus had intensified. Overnight news vans lined the street. Reporters stood outside the main entrance, and security guards were posted at every entrance to keep unauthorized personnel away. Marina watched from her car as hospital staff came and went, many of them forced to run a gauntlet of reporters shouting questions about her actions. She saw Dr. Morse, the pediatric emergency physician. "Do you think she should face criminal charges?" Dr. Morse stopped and turned, her face showing the strain of dealing with the media attention. "I think the focus should be on Tyler Reeves and his recovery, not on creating more drama for your news cycle." "But surely you have an opinion about someone who endangered a child's life." "My opinion is that this hospital saves lives every day, and we don't need the distraction of reporters interfering with our work." Marina watched Dr. Morse disappear into the hospital, then noticed something that made her stomach clench. Coming out of the main entrance, flanked by 2 security guards, were Rebecca Reeves and a small boy in a wheelchair. Tyler He was alive, alert, and arguing with his mother about something, probably wanting to walk instead of being pushed in the wheelchair. Even from a distance, Marina could see that he was a normal, energetic 8-year-old boy and wanted to get back to playing baseball and riding bikes, the kind of child she had nearly killed. Reporters immediately swarmed toward them, shouting questions and shoving microphones forward. Rebecca Reeves looked terrified, pulling her son closer as hospital security tried to clear a path to their car. "Mrs. Reeves, how is Tyler feeling? Do you blame Marina Chen for what happened?" Tyler, how are you doing, buddy? Were you scared when the helicopter couldn't land?" Marina watched in horror as the 8-year-old boy looked around at the chaos, his face showing confusion and fear. This was her fault too, not just the initial incident. But this circus, this invasion of privacy, this traumatization of a family that had already been through enough without thinking. Marina got out of her car and started walking toward the crowd of reporters. Several of them recognized her immediately. "Marina Chen, Ms. Chen, are you here to apologize to the family?" The attention of every camera and microphone turned toward her, momentarily giving Rebecca and Tyler space to reach their car. Marina saw Rebecca look back at her with an expression of pure hatred before helping Tyler into the back seat and driving away. "Ms. Chen, what do you have to say about Jerry Martinez being fired? Are you going to face criminal charges? Do you think your family's donations should exempt you from following safety rules?" Marina stood surrounded by reporters, cameras rolling, microphones thrust toward her face. This was the moment her publicist had been preparing for, the opportunity to control the narrative, to apologize strategically, to begin the process of reputation rehabilitation. Instead, she found herself thinking about Tyler's confused face, about Rebecca's terror, about Jerry's resignation, about Carol Martinez's tears. She thought about all the people whose lives had been turned upside down by her 7 minutes of selfishness. "A child almost died because of your actions." "I know," Marina replied, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "I know what I did." She turned and walked back to her car, ignoring the reporters who followed her, shouting questions she couldn't answer because there were no answers. There was no explanation that would justify what she'd done, no apology that would undo the damage, no amount of money that would erase the consequences. That afternoon, not the university library where she'd done research for her MBA, not the corporate libraries she'd accessed through her father's connections, but the neighborhood branch library where ordinary people went to read newspapers and use computers, and escape their problems for a few hours. She sat at a public computer terminal and read everything she could find about rattlesnake envenomation in children. She learned about the physiology of venom, the progression of symptoms, the critical importance of rapid treatment. She read medical journal articles about pediatric emergency transport, about the golden hour in trauma medicine, about how minutes, sometimes seconds, could determine whether a child lived or died. The more she read, the more she understood how close Tyler had come to death. Not just inconvenience or discomfort, but actual death. Because of her parking choice, she also researched Jerry Martinez's situation. She found articles about age discrimination in employment, about the challenges faced by older workers who lost their jobs, about families struggling with medical expenses and grandparents trying to help support their children and grandchildren. For the first time in her life, Marina began to understand the world that existed outside her bubble of privilege, a world where $50 mattered way